Hello, Know Me Now listeners. It's great to have you back with us today. And today we have Elly Hoyt joining us all the way from London. And she is a jazz and contemporary vocalist, as well as a composer and a vocal coach. So welcome so much, Elly, for joining us today.
Hello.
So do you think you're ready for this?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Well, we'll start with something a little bit more simple. And that is, what is your favorite snack?
Ooh, my favorite snack. The quickest one that comes to mind is miso on a rice cracker with sprouts, alfalfa sprouts.
Going into something a little bit more extreme, if you were to say we end this call today and you go to your front door and sitting at your front door is a letter containing a lottery ticket that someone's given to you, worth so we'll make that $1 million. What would you do with that $1 million lottery ticket?
So many things come to mind. I would want to give some of it away. I'd want to invest some of it, to be honest. I'd be really smart with it. I'd go, all right, let's invest half this and make it compound so that it can be the future, which means then that money can go to other places like more family, to charity. I guess it would just be having a home, buying a home, I think, and traveling, but also put it into music. So I think I'd probably want to put that money into maybe an organization that supports the arts, maybe starting some sort of, I don't know, program for young, aspiring musicians in isolated areas, because I'm actually from a very isolated area in Tasmania, country area. Yeah, I do the records of my dreams. I would like do the music that, and be able to actually do it at that level financially, because you can't always afford to pay, 100 grand, 200, $1 million for a good record.
Heading into something a little bit different now is, what is the funniest moment that has happened to you recently?
My partner and I have been a bit stuck here in London inside, and we've been trying to get out. So we've been taking the Boris bikes. There's these Boris bikes that you can sort of get at a sort of along the street, and you pay £2 and you can take the bike out. Now, I don't know how we missed the memo, but we decided to go for this little trip to visit some friends in a park, and we rode the bike, and we just had the bike sitting there, all day, rode home. And then we end up getting this like £40 kind of bill. And we're both like, what is going on? Like, why is this happening? And for some reason, I don't know how, but supposedly it's £2 for half an hour, but you have to put it back and then you can get it out for half an hour and back. But it's actually more money the longer you have it. So I ended up, but the funniest part was that I'd done it before. I'd went to my closest friend here. It was her birthday, and I rode something like 15 kilometers or something, to get there. And I'd left the bag there all day, and that cost me nearly £60.
Wow.
Yeah, which is like nearly $120, which is actually not that funny. But at the same time, it was like, how did I not read that? Like, so anyway, I was like ringing up the people going, why is this happening? And yeah, basically got that a bit wrong.
Thank you so much, Elly. And we'll now move into the main part of our interview today, which is talking about you and your music. So the first question I have for you is, you talked about before how you were born in Tasmania. Is that correct?
Yep.
So how did you end up from Tasmania all the way to London, where you are now?
It's a really good question. The biggest thing that my father instilled in me, he's American, and my mum grew up in Victoria, Australia. And I think the thing he instilled in me and in our family is travel, and that the world is not as big as you think, I guess. Like, so, well, it's huge, but it's that kind of like excitement about like what is out there, and it's all possible. Like, our parents were always, and I'm one of five, by the way. So when I say our, I'm the youngest of five. So, as kids, we were always told that we could always achieve anything we wanted to, and two, that the world is exciting. It's not a scary place. It's a beautiful place. And so when in 1995, when I was 8 years old, my dad was like, we're going to go traveling for my long service leave, and we're going to go for 3 months around Southeast Asia. And my mum's like, oh God, are we? So he took 5 kids and his wife, so 7 of us, and we traveled around Southeast Asia for 3 months. And that was full on. Like I saw poverty, I saw all this stuff. I was definitely like I had blonde hair and blue eyes. I didn't have a lot of children traveling at the time, so I used to get my hair pulled a lot, and it was really full on. But I remember from that time, I learned a lot about culture. I learned a lot about new kind of environments, and knowing that, I'm going to be okay no matter what. And so from that, all of us in our family, most of us have traveled quite extensively. And because of that, I think that's allowed me to be free in terms of kind of being a bit of a global citizen, because I grew up in a very remote country. It wasn't even a town. It was literally in the country on, 40 acres of land. And from that, I think from traveling around Southeast Asia at a young age, from then living in Queensland doing my undergrad to then living in America and England, I think, yeah, I guess that's why, I guess, is how did that happen? I think it was the way I was brought up, was that it's okay, and it's, and the world is a beautiful place.
So you said you lived in America as well?
Mm.
Cool. And is that all music related, or has some of it just been for the sake of travel?
Has all been music related, yeah. Even though my dad's American, we never really could afford to go to the States. And I didn't actually go until 2011 was the first time I actually went there. And I have dual citizenship. So I actually had sort of a passport that I'd got. And I'm walking in and they're like, welcome home. And I was shocked to have someone say welcome home to a country I'd never been to. And that actually made me quite emotional. And so when I went, I sort of was there for the music side, because my dad had instilled sort of a respect for music, and my mum, but also this American music, because that's where I kind of, I was singing from a young age, singing jazz. So for me, that was like, oh, this is this American music that I'm so attached to. Why? So it was almost like a discovery, going to America, saying welcome home, and going, whoa, like my sense of identity going, huh, but I'm an Aussie, like. And so went there, and at the time I lived there a couple of times. But the first time was through an Australia Council grant that sadly isn't around anymore. But this one was for sort of younger musicians, and it enabled me to go to New York and spend 3 months, or I think it was 2 months, basically living there, studying and sort of learning.
You said you've been singing jazz since a young age. So was your dad came from America and he was passionate about jazz music?
He's a teacher of the arts, which is quite amazing, actually. He was an art teacher in high school. He was an automotive teacher later on in his career. He built our house. He's a potter. He also has painted before. He had a lot of respect for the arts. And so when I say he had a love for jazz, yes, but he wasn't like, oh, I love jazz. It was just that he had a respect for the art form, and so he did have Billie Holiday records, but he also had Bob Marley, and he had Tapestry by Carole King. So he had this collection of music, and I couldn't say that he was like someone that as a person kind of was like, we're going to listen to music all the time. That was more my mum. My mum was like Joni Mitchell, had these wonderful, and she would put on the music, and Dad would be like, oh, I want silence. But he did instill this absolute love and respect, and watching him be able to do all of this, like he was a man of so many skills. It really, like, I was really always inspired by the fact that he was so encouraging and so like, yeah, pottery, he could do it all. It was quite amazing.
Would you say that you kind of were just drawn to jazz yourself, rather and kind of influenced by your family, or how did you end up going towards jazz?
How I found jazz was actually, I did listen to some jazz records, but I never went, okay, I want to be a jazz musician. But there was this beautiful music teacher in high school. I went to Wynyard High School, and we had this teacher that was like, oh, try to do this, audition for this. And I auditioned for this big band, and it was called the Tattersalls Youth Big Band, and it was run by James Morrison. And essentially they'd audition all these musicians from around Tasmania, and they'd pick 2 singers. And so I got picked of one of 2 singers in this audition for this big band. I had no idea what I was going to be doing in the big band. I didn't listen to big band music really, and I didn't really understand swing music. It was just like I loved singing. I loved performing. I was always performing at a young age. So I auditioned, got in. So at 14 in grade 7, I think, ish, was when it sort of all kicked off. And I was then driving all the way to Hobart from the northwest coast of Tassie, 4.5 hour drive to go to rehearsals every 2 weeks or so. And then we'd tour. So we did casinos. We had Don Burrows as the patron. So he came out once and we did this big show. We supported James Morrison and Emma Pask at Marilla Estates at this winery. And I remember having to get past a bodyguard to see Emma Pask. I think by this time I was 16. And I remember going like, I'd listen to her records because by the time I got into this big band, it was something that was a bit more professional. It wasn't me just singing some songs on guitar. It was like, wow, I'm in front of this band. And that was where the love came. And then, you know, going and being able to support James Morrison with his band and then have, you know, Emma Pask and kind of going like I had my cousin's partner sneak me past this guard and knock on the door, like this greenhouse door going like, hi, can I talk to Emma? Emma Pask, you know, and that was when I was 16. So I guess that's where the love of jazz came, was the performing was always on the stand was when I was learning. It wasn't me listening to the records. It was more the learning on the bandstand, and then it was like learning to love the music, because I'm not going to lie, it was never a music that was like, oh, I get it. It was like, it took me years to love it, but once I kind of started to understand it, it's become like the biggest love of my life.
Yeah, and there's a fun in learning as well. That's like just while I've been studying, I've just been realizing how fun it is when you let go of like pressuring and to get like good grades and things like that, is just, yeah, enjoying the process.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's so hard to really say, okay, we know it's the journey, not the destination. We know it's the process, but there's always, I think it's a human nature to kind of go at the back, oh, but I need to achieve that goal. I need to get that thing. The younger you are, if you can actually work that out and actually go, yeah, it's the journey and I'm enjoying it now, you're going to have the best career of your life. But I will say, in my own journey, I've always been very like, okay, I'm going to get that. And I will get it. I have no doubt. But I don't always actually take the time and stop on the way, because sometimes when you achieve these things, I'm not going to lie, you go, oh, I achieved that. Oh, why is there no big epiphany? Why isn't there like, oh, good on you, Elle, like, well done. Like, none of that. Sometimes I've sat there going, I feel empty. Like, I don't even know if I deserve, you know, all this other crap that comes up, you know? So, and then you go, what did you do for the last 5 years working towards that goal that you had, or 10 or 2? You know, like, what were you doing all that time, and back-breaking work and not actually taking the time to enjoy it while you can?
You've had, I mean, many different experiences in your travel and your culture. I mean, maybe there's been some cultural things that you've learned, even just being in America and learning about your dad and like how he's grown up. But how does that culture play into your own music now?
It plays a huge role, actually. And as I'm getting older, I'm going more and more deeper into who I am and my identity. I find that because I'm now living in England, I'm having to really rediscover my roots, because I'm also kind of looking at this idea of dislocation and belonging. Because when you start again, and I've done this a number of times, I've lived in, I moved out of home at 17. I went to Hobart, which is 4.5 hours away from my parents. I moved to Brisbane and lived in Brisbane for 4 years. I did 4 years in Melbourne. I did another 2 or 3 years in Brisbane again. I've lived in America for a year and off and on for a couple months. I now live in England for 2 years. So just to get the grasp of this idea of dislocation and belonging, I think as I'm getting older, because of my experiences and also my cultural background, and my dad being American, my mum being Australian, I think that plays a massive role in my music and also what I believe in. And so what's really interesting is a lot of the music that I'm writing at the moment is very much about that as an essence. There's also other projects that I've done that kind of then from that kind of I look at then identity for refugees and all these other things I'm passionate about, because I guess in my experience I have been able to understand, or at least have a sense of what that is like, because of the amount of times I've moved and been kind of doing different things in different places.
Right. So then going into the projects, because you just mentioned, yes, some of the projects you've done, you actually worked with a cartoonist who and wrote some music around him. Would you maybe share what that was about and why you did it, and yeah, how that happened.
Yeah. The opportunity came that that my partner got an amazing job, and it was a really good time for him to sort of pursue that. And England, London, it's still a great place for jazz to be and for music. And so we thought, all right, stuff it. We want to live overseas at some point in our life, and let's do it. Now, at that point in time, I'd just come back from America, and I was living in Brisbane, and I just finished recording this record that I was really passionate about, and it was called The Composer's Voice, celebrating Australian women composers. And that was another thing, talking about identity again, of course, is telling these stories, and telling our own stories as women, and bringing more of women composers in the forefront, especially in jazz, because we are very much underrepresented. And so I was like, okay, I want to do that. And so that was that project, right? So I just recorded it. And then Adam had just got this call and this opportunity that's like literally within a week was like, hey, do you feel like going to England? And I was like, no, like I just did this record. I'm going to tour it. I'm going to do all these wonderful things. And he's like, no, but like this, I think this could be a wonderful opportunity. And we talked about it, discussed it, and went, all right, let's do this. So from that, it was like, I'm going to have to change this whole thing. So we moved to England, and then I ended up kind of setting up the house and then sort of finishing this record over here in terms of just editing and then mastering, mixing. So then I had to kind of from here figure out how I'm going to do that tour and how I'm going to try to get that album out and present an Australian thing here in another country, which is a little bit like, okay. So then as I'm doing that, I got this sort of opportunity. I was nominated by Julian Wilson, one of my favorite saxophone players in the world. And he's from Australia, and he nominated me for the Friedman Fellowship after recording that album because he was on it. And the Friedman Fellowship basically is for musicians under the age of 35 to sort of present something that you want to do. And then you go, if you get in the finals, you get to play at the Sydney Opera House and present your project. And then if you win, you get to do a record, you get money, etc. So that was where it was like, okay, so I was finishing this album, and then that came up as an opportunity. I'm like, well, I've got to take this, and it's a lot of work to actually go, all right, I'm going to do this, because it's one thing going, oh yeah, I'll do it. But I'm someone that won't do something by halves. I'm not going to be happy otherwise. So I kind of went gung ho. I had 3 months to compose, and I thought, okay, what's my next project? This is where Ali Dorani, this political cartoonist, comes in, because I'd had a friend who is fairly political in a good way, had sent this message saying, hi, you've got to check out Ali. He's coming to London and talking about his experience. And I'm like, what experience? And I looked into his work, and I literally, this is how I sort of found it, was I like looked at his cartoons and just was like, what? And basically it was his experience on Manus Island. So he's this guy that has come from Iran as he was seeking asylum, came through Indonesia on a boat, got picked up and taken to Manus Island. Now he was on that island, I think, for nearly 5 years, but he was sexually abused. There were some really horrific things happen. He was ended up being put in isolation because he was unsafe in the population, in the general population, and which meant that he was isolated. And it was awful for him. And so he was depicting these kind of cartoons.
I'm on my way to find freedom. I'm on my way to find some peace, somewhere that I can speak my truth, a space that I can call my own, a place that I can call my home. I'm on my way to find freedom. I'm on my way to find some peace, somewhere that I can speak place that I can call my own, place that I can call my home.
And when I'd seen it, I went, why don't I know about this? Why don't I know about this policy in Australia? How is it that we as people from Australia don't know that our policy is to send all refugees, or generally most of them, to these crazy, like Christmas Island, to Manus Island, and put them in detention centres that are like jail, with no hope, with no knowing when they're going to be even let out, that some of them are there for years. And it's just, you know, not knowing that made me quite like, whoa. So I then spent 3 months working with a guy called Jeff Gascoigne, and he was the MD for Jamie Cullum. He's a double bass player, arranger, composer. He's just absolute monster musician and human. And so I worked with him, and he really helped me get it across the line. It wouldn't have happened without him. And so he sort of helped me solidify these ideas and put it into kind of a composition, a suite, where we were, you know, put the artwork and the music together to tell this story about Ali, but also talk about the policies within that music. And that was something I've never done before. It was pretty challenging emotionally. It was pretty challenging in terms of the time frame. And the whole kind of thing is pretty raw, you know, and I really want it to be pretty raw, like some of it where I actually pretty much scream in this piece. And it had improvisation elements, but it had very much storytelling, but also some, you know, text where I was speaking. And so that led me to being, you know, in the finals and playing at Sydney Opera House and sharing that kind of piece of work to the Australian public, to be on ABC. And for me, I have to say that was probably one of the most rewarding pieces of work I've done so far. It was absolutely scary, I'm not going to lie. There was a side to me that was like, what are you doing? And there's the other side that said, you know what? You need to do this. You need to tell this story, because not enough people are talking about this, and there's not enough people advocating for these people in this world.
When people hear that suite of music that you created, what do you want them to take away from that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I want them to be able to kind of have a bit more understanding of what it's like to be someone in that position, because we don't always get to put out, you know, the shoe on the other foot. So we always kind of go, oh, from my experience, you know, like they'll be right. It's just a detention center. But if you're not in the detention center and you don't know what it's like to feel like, that was the main point of that piece of work. I think I wanted people to take away, like, what does it feel like when you're in that situation with no hope? You don't know when you're going to leave. You're trapped. You're in a very difficult situation. How would that feel? And so in that room at the Sydney Opera House, when I kind of work through this music to the point where it's like I'm literally screaming, help me, and I'm screaming it again and again, and like I just want to cry just thinking about it. But being in that room, I'm sure they were like, this person is so like affected and so emotional. It's like, yeah, these people are going through a lot. As a topic of you know, of refugees and asylum seekers, that if we can start to even understand just tiny bit or feel what it's like to be on the, you know, other side, then you might want to actually make action, make change, actually do something about it.
Thank you so much for your time today as well, Elly. Sharing all of the stories and the advice and the wisdom that you've been sharing with us. I appreciate it, and I'm sure, the Know Me Now listeners are appreciating it too.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure. It's nice to be able to share my story and you know, with you and for other people that want to listen.